All right, so welcome to session 6. So how tonight is going to work, I'm going to talk through a couple of basic offenses. So this is less to teach you about these offenses and more to establish a bit of a baseline into how to talk about teaching methods for it, just so we've got a bit of an idea and I can use examples, because I don't want to be throwing out my examples of, say, the shuffle or flow or conceptual motion and have you guys sort of sitting there trying to keep up with what I'm saying on that part. I want the focus of the teaching methods to be on the teaching methods themselves and not actually the offenses. So we're going to go through the shuffle, flow, and 4-out conceptual motion. And then I'll talk about the teaching methods. So how I try and teach all of our offenses that we get through is just a whole part whole method. And that's where I show everybody the basic concept of it 5 on 0, and then break it down into a bunch of little parts and then try and teach them how they all stack up together. And then we throw into the whole back at the end, and how we do that using breakdowns, and then part of the conceptual motion stuff and the flow stuff is how defenders are used to force decisions and how you can use them in a 2v5, 2v3 situation to just build a bit of knowledge. So hopefully this works. We're going to start off with the shuffle offense. So the shuffle offense is very, very common. I've never run this offense myself, but I've seen a lot of it in VJBL. Understand too that when I frame this stuff, I know some of you that might coach domestic might be like, well, offenses, like we don't really get a chance to put in a set offense. That's fine. I still think this is going to be relevant to you on more of a teaching level. You might pick up a few things about offenses here you didn't know, which is great. But even if you don't, like more the concept of, I guess, how to teach an offense more so than the offense is what I hope that you pick up out of this. So I'm just going to go over this pretty briefly. So it's going down. I didn't draw this either. I got this off an old BA article by Lindsay Gaze. So this isn't my work. But the shuffle concept has a third and a first side, which I'm going to go over now. It has a lot more things, an inverted look and a couple of different, but just this is what you see every Friday night from a Melbourne Tigers team still. And it works all the time. We played a Melbourne Tigers team in the first round of grading, and the third action still got them layups relentlessly, regardless of how many times I told people what it was going to look like. Still works. So their numbering system, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is not a traditional numbering system. I believe anyway that for them the number 4 is your shooter. These guys are all pretty much guards, but your 5-man is still your postman. So that's how this sort of is meant to work. So this is the basic setup, and the 3 has the ball in this situation. So the 3 reverses the ball through the 2 and down to the 1, and the 5-man sets a back pick for the 3 to get over the top of to dive down to the block here. Now, after the 5-man has set that screen, the 2-man, after he's passed the ball, steps in, and it's a double stagger away for the 4-man to head over to the elbow. So basically that's that third action is you're getting a quick back pick down to the low block and then a double stagger away, all while the 1-man here has the ball on that right side wing. From there, that ball can go in. He has plenty of options to pass down. It could go straight into that guy that cut first too. And you've got options to pass the ball. Then once we start to get onto that reversal, we have the first side. The first side is more passing to the strong side. And then the 5-man sets the back pick for that guard to get through, and then sets the on ball here for that man to then use the on ball screen. That's one of the only times you'll see people dribble with a ball in the shuffle if it's not a straight line drive at the basket is using that first side on ball screen. So without sort of tying you tediously down to too many details here, and you've all got the PowerPoint that I sent through with the invitation, so you can go over that if it's something that intrigues you. But from what I've seen about the shuffle, and again, I don't claim to be a shuffle expert, it's not something I've ever taught, but it's predominantly back screens and good away screens with a little bit of on ball thrown in there. And that's how you find they generate most of their opportunities and advantages, more so than a dribble drive predicated offense. And I remember seeing Lindsay talk about this once and say, like, this is the best offense to run because you don't have to be athletic and it's not a running race, and it's all predicated on individual decision making and guys and girls being really smart basketballers, and that is what it's all about. So some basic movements there. The flow offense. So I assume that a lot of you will be somewhat familiar with this. Now, the flow offense is a continuous offense that has a 2-person side and a 3-person side spacing, and can have an empty or a full post. We're going to talk about a full post tonight, just for the sake of it being explained a fair bit easier. So the ball gets brought down one side of the court with a full post here on the, so full, I mean, it's on the strong side, and it reversal through to that second side 4-man who kicks the ball under the 3-man who sets a 2-person side on ball. So it's a 2-person side because on this side of the split line, there is 2 people there. The 1 and the 2 would exchange in the corner to try and take people out of that on-ball wall that defense is normally set up. And as that on-ball screen happens, the 5 raises on that weak side. So this is what we see here. We have the 3 using the 4 on ball, and as he comes off, he's got the 5 who's raised. He's got the 4 who's now diving to the basket, so he could hit either of them, or he could drive to the basket himself, being the 3 most obvious options off of that drive. Assuming he passes it to the 5, because the flow is a bit of a continuity offense. Now he has that ball at the top. These are the next 2 options of what 2 of the options anyway that can happen next. So you've got the 2-man who could sprint into a pin down on the 1, and the 1 lifts into a dribble handoff or a dribble pitch or a pass and chase on ball screen here, while the 2 slips through to the basket. And once again, the 4 raises to empty out that weak side post. So then you'd have the 1 using the 5 on this on ball here, and he's got the same 3 options that the 3-man had when he used the 4-man for the on ball here. Or you could do the much more commonly seen back cut handoff set up here, where the 2 sprints straight through on a basket cut through to the weak side. The 4-man lifts, the 5-man then pitches to the raising 1, chases it with an on ball, and he has those same 3 options that everybody has every other time they've driven off a 2-man side or a 3-man side on ball. So they're the 2 most common actions you see. I mean, this one is by far the most common action you see when you go through. I've been to a lot of country champs in the last 4 years, and you've seen it just about everywhere. The concept that's lost a little bit on people is that they think that is just flow, is the back cut handoff. At least not how I had it taught to me. That was an option, but because a lot of people didn't quite understand the other options, it's sort of just denigrated down to being that all the time, and it was back cut handoff, back cut handoff, back cut handoff, and it just got a little bit repetitive. But by all means, that's not just flow. That's just what is the most common part of flow you see. Now, some 4-out motion, much harder to explain over Zoom, much harder to teach kids in my experience. So there's more slides on the next slide. There's a few drawings of different actions. So the concept of conceptual motion, you get me. In the one that I'm going to show you today is a 4-out conceptual motion where you use the corners and the 2 wings, or a little bit higher than the wings in sort of that guard spot here where the 3-man is, and 1 post player. So the idea here is you would have 1 person who is a point guard, potentially, 3 guards, wings who are all interchangeable, 1 of whom would be noted as being the best shooter, so you could run shooting options for them, and 1 post player. So it's a bit less your traditional 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you really only need 1 big man, which is handy for a lot of teams because it's hard enough to find 1 big man, whereas with flow you need 2. And I don't know about you guys, but I coach a lot of kids who are like, but I'm 6'1", I'm not a big man. I'm like, I know, but you're still the biggest guy we've got, so what do you want me to do about it? So I think this is a really good idea because it allows you to let people play in more useful positions to them in terms of their long-term development. Instead of a continuity offense, it uses triggers. It requires them to read defense, and I'll talk about how you can use the Spurs drill to create space later. But it's a much more read and react. Now, that's not to say that the shuffle has no read and react concepts. It's not to say the flow doesn't have any read and react concepts either. It's just more based on reading what the defense gives you than anything else, because it's a little bit more figured out as you go along. So what I've got here are some actions for you. Now, you might be sitting here thinking, it'd be really handy if you labeled all of these actions for me, Joel. And trust me, I get it. When I was making this, I was having a lot of trouble feeding it all on one slide, and it just wasn't working for me. So leave that with me. When I send out my email tomorrow about this, I'll try and name all these actions a bit better for you, so that way you're not just left staring at this, what looks like a mess. I agree. So actions. The whole concept of the whole concept of conceptual motion is that players read the defense and do what is most likely to make a scoring option. Now, this could be step-up screens into a punch screens. It can be pin downs on the away side. It can be X cuts. It can be through cuts. So I just sort of draw a couple up so that for at least that you understand a little bit better after this, the terminology we're dealing with here. So this is what I would call a punch screen, where the 5-man sprints up and sets an on ball for the point guard who is in his guard spot. And this is the otherwise spacing that you would see a lot of teams use, especially teams in the NBA and stuff, where they're literally 2 steps outside the 3-point line because they can shoot that far. It's really handy. And this is a wide pin down or an away screen or just a pin down, whatever you want to call it. Wide pin down is what Vic Country and Vic Metro use at the moment. So you see that you have bigs or wings going in 2 different ways, and it's forcing a lot of defenders to make decisions. Now, this is something that the point guard could call for. It's something the 5-man who might feel like he can't pin the person under the basket might sprint out to do. The idea is that you would teach the players the different things they can do, and then on the fly, they would make the decisions based off what the defense gives them. Sounds awesome, can be difficult to teach. From the last 7 months teaching this to all my SDP kids, when we got to our tournaments in January, it started off as a bit of a mess because they really didn't know when to do what, and they're also used to following a bit simpler pattern that was a little bit harder for them. But after 7 days of playing it, I must say by the end I was amazed at how well they were picking it up. Now, this is not to say you can't prescribe these actions, and I still do, but it's more so they can just play on the fly. So again, I'll just discuss them. So I've discussed that one. This one is what you might do if the 5-man was slow down the floor, and I think we can all sort of understand that it's easy to tell the 5-man that he's got to be there to get the defensive rebound, and then he's also got to be the first man down the floor. It's a little bit less likely that it happens all the time. So it's a lot to ask, especially of someone who potentially is massive, and a lot of big dudes, especially once you get older, are really heavy. So when they get caught behind that ball carrier, instead of saying, yeah, sprint, we still want you to get down here, just have him step into that late screen and roll with that. Now you have guys moving off the ball, shaping around, so that as their defenders try and sort of wall up on this quick ball screen, you've got guys going on backdoor cuts, and you've got everybody moving in that sort of circular motion to make it a little bit harder for them to do so. So that was what we call a delay screen, or it can be called a late screen. That's what some of the boys started calling it when we were at Albury, but delay is what I would call that there. This is a through cut. So most of you have probably seen a through cut at some point before. It was big in the flow offense as well on that first side, to where the 1-man would pass the ball onto the 2, and he would sprint through to the other side. The 2-man might decide to rip baseline off of that. The 5-man steps into the dunker spot. The other 2 guys shape around to give room for the 1-man to get through. That's the basic of a through cut, because he's cutting through the key. Probably should have drawn it to the basket and out the other side, but didn't happen. A wide pin down. So this is a really good one for a point guard who may just want to try and get some of his teammates into the game. That quick reversal through the other wing, stepping out now to set that wide pin down, bring the 2-man over to the ball. It's simple, but giving them these options onto how they could shape away from the ball instead of always coming towards the ball was really important in teaching these sort of concepts. The double stagger away. So again, the 1 starter with the ball, he's gone that early reversal to the 3. He's gone to set that wide pin down. 3-man thought, yep, great, I'll get on that too. They both sprinted over. They've set that stagger away. The 2-man comes curling off of that. While these guys are all in a shamble over here trying to guard that double stagger away and figure out who the shooter is and where they're going, 5-man can just step under the basket and generally get a pretty easy catch because everybody's really worried about this action. But also there's a lot of good things you can get off of that double stagger away too. Here we've got an X cut. So with the Basketball Victoria stuff this year, we wanted the through cut to be the default and the X cut to be an aggressive change up. But the kids just love the X cut. So the X cut is where you pass to that. I've got there's a 4-man here, but it would have been the 2-man up here. You pass to that guy in the strong side wing, and instead of cutting through to the other side, you now cut down to his strong side corner. So it's sort of like a brush screen, as you may have heard about before. But it's where this guy, he's not actually setting a screen here, but he's sort of brushing the back of the now ball defender, and so that 4-man can really drive off the heels of his own teammate. And now it's likely that the 2 defensive teammates are sort of in each other's way here, which gives us a lot of extra movement on a screen. And then the 5-man circles under to the weak side corner backboard, and you'd have yourself a pretty easy shot there, or hopefully you would. Last one I wanted to speak about, which is much easier to do with video, which unfortunately I didn't have of any of the stuff that I'd taken, is double gapping. So this is one where, as you would have seen playing against a lot of pack defense in the last few years, when the 3-man might try and drive through the nail here, who's standing on the nail but the one guy's defender? So instead of just shaping around further to that corner and being a shooter, which these are your two sort of catch and shoot positions, which is granted, as he drives at that middle guy, this offensive player can shoot straight through on a back cut, creating a double gap, because now from the 3-man to the 2-man, there's a double gap here, and it forces that help nail defender to really make a decision. And if he then decides he's going to go with his 1-man, well, that leaves the nail now open for the 3 to continue the drive through. If he decides he's going to stay put and let the split line defender take care of that 1-man, well, then now there's no one left to guard this 2-man instead. So he might raise up a little bit and be open for that pitch and shoot there as well. So the concept of a double gap is when instead of moving away from the ball, you move to the basket on a drive, which hopefully creates a decision for a help defender. Obviously, that's not something you would do if the defender was right up here in the 1's face. It's something you would do to try and take him away from sitting in a driving lane, which kids are all too happy to do these days. So I know you must just be like, I can't even remember what he said. You should have put labels on him. But that's the basic gist of some of the concepts in a conceptual motion. How they work together, completely up to you as a coach, completely up to the players on a fly. Personally, I was a really big fan, teams that I've coached in the last year, of pitching that ball here, having him sprint a through cut, have these 2 guys step down into a double stagger, and as the 1-man who potentially, or in my case, has been one of the better ball handlers, is coming up off of that, now no one's really helping the 5-man. If he can get that ball, he's stepping up to catch the ball there, and there's no one ready to guard him on that middle rib drive. It's just a really good thing to do. And it's not that that's a set play. It's just, all right, I'm coming out of a timeout and I'm saying we're going through cut into a double stagger away, but let's look at the post. And it's not that it's a set offense, and it's not something that's easy for other people to scout, and it's not something that's too predictable, but you're just using those different concepts to really get the kids thinking. And you might give them that after timeout or after a quarter time or a half time and say, this is what we're going to do here. And then for the next 4 minutes, it's being inventive for them. It's using those different things that sorry about my dog. It's using those different things that they know as concepts to sort of string them together in a way that works basketball for them. And again, it's clunky to start with, but once they actually get the hang of it, it's a whole lot better. So now I'm going to talk about whole part whole. So hopefully that hasn't bored you. Sorry if it's a bit sort of all over the place. I just thought it was a good idea if we talked a little bit about that stuff first, so that we have a baseline to talk about here. So whole part whole, which I didn't make up, I'm pretty sure I heard it from someone. I like to go through things 5-on-0 first. I think 5-on-0 is a really good time for athletes to ask questions and just see what the finished product should look like. And I think if you think back to the last couple of weeks when I've been talking about understanding the goal, when we're talking about individual defense, when we're talking about team defense, it's showing them what this should ideally look like, which is really important. So as they go through, they know. Now, again, conceptual motion, it's not a continuity offense, so maybe that's a little bit harder, but giving them those dry runs so they can see what it looks like when they're part of it and not just what it looks like when they're watching it, really, really important. Some people that I work with don't really believe in 5-on-0. They would rather you put 2 defenders in there just so it creates a little bit of havoc and decision making. Well, that's fine. Like we're not all the same, so that's up to you as a coach as to what you like to do. But I think it's a really good time to ask questions and to have them understand the goal, which is why I think it's really important. Now, I'm going to throw this thing on the screen. So for those of you that missed it, this is my really techie trial this week to see how this iPad thing works. That's why there's a watermark down there. I promise I'll buy it next week if it works well this week. So you might decide, all right, we're going to break this down into small-sided games. So using flow as an example, I might say, great, we've got, sorry, I've got the rubber on still. We've got our 1, 2, 4, 3, 5. All right, I really want to make this a simple 2-on-2 game. So I might now elect these 2 people, get rid of the rest of them. Oh, you can't really see that over that watermark. I thought it was going to be more transparent than that. All right, you understand anyway. So this is the 3-man. And you might say, all right, now we're just going to play out of this 2-person on ball on this weak side here. As a coach, I'm going to be the one man up the top here. I'm going to pass the ball over. That's how it's going to start. And then you guys are going to play 2-on-2. So that's them really working on different defensive coverages, different offensive engagement structures to make sure that they can nut out how it's going to look on the fly coming down the court if they cop that early reversal. You may decide not to worry about them for now. Maybe you're going to work on the first side first, which probably isn't a bad idea. So instead, you're going to loop in the 1, the 2, and the 5. Now, this might be that you allow the pass to the 2-man over here, and then as he gets that ball into the 5-man, now you're playing live off of that. It might be that after he's caught the ball and it's live, now we're throwing that ball back out to the 1 and he's chasing with a punch screen. So you can break down into 2-on-2, 3-on-3, or even 4-on-4 to try and be more specific and pointed in what you want to learn out of this, because it's really easy to let them go and play 5-on-5. But in a 5-on-5 situation where there's 10 guys or girls and 1 ball, it often means that 9 players don't touch the ball a lot. And I know I coach under 18 boys, and it's often that way. So really important to find different ways to break down, because if you do set this up so that you have the 4 up here and he's just caught the ball off the coach who's on this side, so he's caught that ball, now he's pitching the ball back to the 1, and now he's got to chase and set that on ball. You can have that game going at both ends of your court. You can condense that a little bit more and have that game going so the coach is now at the top, and you've got the 5 and the 3 over here, and they're both playing on their own. Oh, crikey. I don't know what's going on there. They're playing on their own side of split line, and now you're utilizing that space a whole lot better to make sure that they can play both sides of the court. So you've got 2 basketballs going for only 8 players potentially there, which might be everybody you have. So everybody's engaged, everybody's defending the ball, everybody's doing the right thing. Sorry, I know you can probably hear my dog. I can't, but he's chasing a mozzie or something. He's a fool. So that is how we break things down. Now, that's in terms of flow offense, and that might be really simple because it's a continuity offense, and there are very specific parts of it that are different, and it becomes easier to break down because you've got 2-person sides, you've got 3-person sides. Give me a minute, sorry. Really sorry about that. So, conceptual motion. Now you might just be simpler to say we have the 1-man, the 2-man, and their defenders. Now we have the 2-man lift, we pass the ball, we chase on that X cut, and now we're trying to play out of that X cut / brush screen, whatever you want to call it, and we're looking to play live out of there. So it's really just about finding different ways that you think you're going to create penetration and how to break that down into a 2-on-2 or a 3-on-3 situation so that you can have more people dribbling the basketball, more people actually playing meaningful possessions during a training session. What I normally try and do to that is find different ways that I think will be best for my team. So if we're going to be a really good on-ball using team because I've got great guards, then we play more with that. If we're going to be a good post-feeding team because we've got really good bigs, then that's where we start. So that way they start to see meaningful understanding and how it's going to work for them as you build through that 2-on-2, 3-on-3 stage. Now, what I do after that is I play what I would call 3-possession games. So that is where we play 1 half-court possession where I might prescribe exactly what I want to see out of that to give them the learning of listening to me talk and them acting, which is an acquired skill. It's not just something that kids know, which I've learned as I go along, and then let them more free play within the concepts that we've been teaching up the other end for a full court possession and then back down the end for another full court possession. So they've played 3 possessions in total. Now with the older age groups, I like to let them huddle and sort of coach themselves in between those 3-possession games. I think the 16s and 18s age group, that's essential to trying to breed better leaders, because if they're always just used to you saying this is what we're doing and go, then they get out there on a court and they can't hear you. It's too loud. Maybe you've missed a game, whatever. And they all look at each other like, well, Joel's normally the one tells us what to do. So what happens now? So really important in building leaders. With younger kids, your 10, 12s and 14s, it's more a you-led sort of huddle where you bring them in and you might pick out on one part of that possession you thought was fantastic that Jamie did and he did a really good job, and then you might think, all right, well, maybe there was a mistake that a couple of you made, and then we talk through that instead. So that's how I would then step that out. So before you get onto a 5-on-5 scrimmage, you're now going to 3 possession games where you get that consistent stoppage that you can use to teach those mistakes. And that's really important in terms of you correcting mistakes before they become habits. And then once you're happy with how that looks in the 3 possession games, you might step it out into 5-on-5 scrimmage where you might play for 4 minutes and let them just roll with it, see what mistakes they make. And you wouldn't stop that unless there was something really, really wrong about it. So in terms of how I teach an offense, really that's it. I don't spend a lot of time with drills. All of the stuff we do is relevant to how we are going to run an offense on a Friday night. And if I'm doing drills, it's more at the very, very start of a practice where we do a couple and then we get into this sort of play. So teaching on-ball screens is obviously a really big part of the flow offense. So we do that all the time where we set up on that wing and play 2-on-2, and we have 2 courts for 20 guys most of the time. So we get 2-on-2 happening on both sides of both half courts. So we have 8 games of 2-on-2 going at once, or at least 6, depending on how many guys are there. And we roll through that. So that way we're using those concepts more to teach more than anything else, and not just running drills for the sake of doing drills and getting them better at skills. We're figuring out how they can do skills to actually be useful on the court. So I understand that I've rabbited on a lot there, and I'm also through my PowerPoint because I didn't want to overload it like I have done in the last couple of weeks. So what I thought would be a good question here is for some of you who may be sitting there thinking, if you're not too confused by how much I rabbited on anyway, but that you have some questions, or it might be specific to your team, it might be specific to what I've spoken about tonight, but hopefully we can get a couple of questions out and have a little bit of discussion around this. And it might be an idea that you have that you just want to share. It might be something that you want an opinion on. Feel free to shoot them through to me. It might be something as simple as what offense should I run, or I've been running this one, what do you think about that? So yeah, I'll throw the floor out to you guys and hopefully we can get a little bit of chat going.
Yeah, Joel, it's Troy. Can you hear me?
Yeah, mate, got ya.
Just a quick one. Like talking domestic-wise, which is where I'm talking. How many weeks would you say to set? If I looked at this and you wanted to do it bit by bit by bit, how many weeks would you think it would take before they'd start grasping the whole shebang? If that makes sense. If I like, what's your time frame? Like, is it 6 weeks, 8 weeks? When should I be sort of seeing that they can really start to implement this in a game? I know you said 7 days for your some of the SDP stuff, but when you're talking domestic, what do you think would be a relatively good time frame to work on? Like half a season? Is it something that
Are you talking 10s or 12s or an older age group?
No. I'm talking 14, 16s.
I would think within a month, if you're training once a week for an hour, you should start to be able to see some shape of that offense. Now, it might not be that them flawlessly executing it all the time, but at least that shape. And so I'll just get this up. Do you know, Troy, like what, are you running one of these offenses or a different one just so I can draw the shape that's relevant to you?
No.
Okay. Well, let's just say you're running something like flow again, just for argument's sake. I would expect that within a month, they should be able to run down the floor and at least be in that shape, where they've got the ball here and they're able to set that up. Now, you might have given them this is what we want to look at first or second, and maybe the first thing you want out of this is an early reversal. I know that's what my team does, so we can get the ball into that second side and make the defense shift. In a month, I would expect them to be able to do that. Good shape and understand what they are there to do first. Within 6 to 8 weeks, I'd expect them to start getting 2 ball reversals. And so that way, when I say 2 ball reversals, they brought that down, they kicked it to the 4, they've kicked it to the 3, set that on ball and come off, and now they've pitched the ball back to the raising 5. I would think in 6 to 8 weeks, that's where you should be able to get them to. And then any understanding after that depends on how much you're able to, critique what they're doing. And obviously in domestic games, you don't have film, so that makes it harder, because it's not like you have film sessions to show them where they're going wrong, but at least then you're going to have an opportunity to sort of explain to them during a training session, hey, this is what we did a lot of on Friday afternoon or Saturday morning, and here's where we go from there. One thing I think is important is with teaching your offense is it should be a large part of your training. And a lot of people that I see when I'm at training and domestic training at BSEC a bit is they're running stuff like 3-man weave as a warm-up when you could be doing 5-on-0 as a warm-up. You could be doing 5-on-2 as a warm-up with that offense that you set in, and they're still getting those reps up and down the court, so they're getting their body engaged and they're actually getting warm. But instead of doing 3-man weave, which granted, if you're playing 2-on-1 or 3-on-2 on the way back of a 5-man weave, you are doing some decision-making stuff there. But instead of those laps of the court where they're just kicking that ball ahead twice and making a layup, you're actually getting them through reps of your offense, and that way they're consistently getting used to running down the court in that shape. And I think that's those kinds of things, and making the changing in your training to reflect your offense versus just chucking the ball forward. It's just not easy. Does that answer your question? Does it, Troy?
Yeah, it does. Look, one thing I wanted to say, which I think was really relevant, and it was something I picked up on, just where you're saying the big didn't get down. I think that's probably one of the things that I can say 100% I've been lacking in all the years I've been coaching, because I'm probably the guy saying, you lazy ass, get down the other end so you can do both ends, if you know what I mean. So I really liked what you said with the variable to some of the setups to actually say for the big, they're not going to get there, so let's use you in a different way at the top of the 3-point line.
Yeah, and I think that's part of that's a really good part about conceptual motion, because it doesn't require any one person to be in a specific position all the time. So if you're saying that the offense is going to start when the 5 gets to the post, but he's the guy that got the defensive rebound, and he then outlet it to the point guard who's smaller, quicker, better ball handler, and he's now sprinting up the floor, like, it's not really fair to expect the 5 to then trudge his way up the floor and beat the 1-man down. Like, it's just not going to happen a lot of the time. So that's a really good part of conceptual motion. And a lot of other offenses can handle it as well by just subbing in the 4-man potentially to be that 5-man spot, and then the 5-man flow down late. But just, being realistic with the expectations.
Fantastic.
I've got a question from Ben, who said, I've tried to teach this with 15 to 20 minutes after skill drills, and it's never worked. Yeah,
it wasn't so much a question, more a comment.
yeah, sure. I can see that. And are your trainings like an hour?
1 hour per week.
Yeah. So you've got it. I understand. What age group are they, Ben?
From 12 to 16s.
So with the under 16s, I would think that it's, and even under 14s, I would think that you can, or a good place to start would be to send them home with some drawings. Not everyone learns well off of paper, but I've found that, because I don't learn well off paper, I don't do it a lot, but a lot of kids are asking me for it more these days because they like to read it and envisage it. I would be sending them home with those sorts of materials, so that way they could sort of absorb it before they get to training. Now, there's every chance they get home and they never open that book again, but you can only do what you can do as a coach. And if they're not that committed to being better at this sort of stuff, then you're only going to have so much luck anyway. So I'd find a different way to incorporate more of your offensive stuff into those skills drills. Because if you're spending, let's say you're spending 10 minutes on warm up, half an hour on skills, and then the last 15 to 20 on team offense, there's probably not enough repetition for them to really get that uptake. Whereas if you're having that warm up is 5-on-0 end to end learning the offense instead of 3-man weave, and then when you're coming into doing some more skills drill stuff, like you're doing 1v1 dribbling, but you're setting them up to do it off of the wing, coming off cones, and the cones are the on ball being set, and that's the second side of the flow offense. And then when you're working on your passing, you're trying to pass into the post, which is the first side of the flow offense. And that way we're doing skills drills, but we're doing drills that work on the skills that are directly going to relate to the offense that we're going to run. And so by the end of training, you've done 40 minutes of skill work, but it's not, this is piggy in the middle, and this is another passing drill, and this is some full court 1v1 defense dribbling drills. You've done stuff that's much more relevant to your actual offense. And then when you get to that last 15, 20 minutes and you're saying, all right, now we're on the offense, as you go through, you're pointing out, it's that 1v1 defense stuff here, or that 2v2 defense stuff we did here working on on-ball D. This is actually this part of the offense. And that passing stuff we did on how to feed the post, well, this is the first side of the offense. And I think you'll find the kids pick it up a lot more. I did this with under 14 girls in 2017, and that's how I played it. And this was before I did the whole thing, but I taught them all the different parts of the offense over about a 6-week period. And then when we all chucked it together, they were like, oh, this is this part. And I was like, yeah, it is. And I felt really smart, but that was the plan, right? And they didn't realize it was all part of learning that team offense, but eventually it was.
A quick question.
Yep.
When you're starting to introduce this, and you say it takes 6-8 weeks, whatever it is, what are you playing in the meantime? Are you just saying, do the one thing that we learnt this week, or I don't know.
Okay, so that's a great question. Assuming you have no pre-season, it's just straight into it.
Yeah.
You're trying to teach them the basic shape. So again, using flow as an example, you're trying to teach them that there's a 3-person side and a 2-person side. So if all they work out of that is, this is where I've got to start standing, and then everything else after that is a breakdown, and it's just them trying to figure out how to play downhill and get heat on the rim, that sort of stuff, fine. I think that's a perfectly good idea, and I don't think you necessarily have to prescribe it all. I think that especially in your sort of 14s and 12s offense, the vast majority of the offense the vast majority of the offensive scores in the game are going to be in transition anyway. And it's going to be that kick ahead, also the big outlets to one of the guards. He throws it down the court to one of his mates. He's got it now. He's got heat on the rim, and the rest of it's just a breakdown offense anyway. So I don't think it's, look, it might be obvious that there's no structure in there otherwise, but I don't think it's going to be as big a part of the offense earlier, or a bigger problem to the offense earlier as you think, because they're still going to have that basic concept of, I've got to dribble the ball in. Now, if you can build into them that the first pass is an early reversal, or maybe the first pass is a kick ahead, or it's a reversal if it can't be a kick ahead, that might be the only thing you can build into that first week other than the shape, but then you can start building on that afterwards. So, yeah, and I think that all kids have the basic concept of, ball in rim. So hopefully in the meantime, you can actually sort of start to work those things out. I've got a recommendation from Nagsy that advantage plays 1v1 and 2v1. Nagsy, do you want to speak to that at all, mate? Or...
Just generally, once you do get into structure, just keep relating back to your advantage plays. If you do see an advantage, taking it. Too many kids get lost in the actual structure that they have to set this, have to run this, have to run that. If they just have their understanding that basketball overrides, and if they've got that advantage coming off the on ball, take it. Be a lot more aggressive and confident in it. And just as coaches, just encourage it. The more they learn within the actual pressured environment of trying, the more outcomes you're going to get off in more set up, structured structure. So, yeah.
And I guess, Ben, that's a great point, Nagsy. And that's sort of what I tied back to before, where I said a lot of your possessions are going to come out of offensive transition anyway. And so whilst you're trying to build a bit of a structured offense, you don't want them to, Benny looks up the floor and he sees John, and then he wants to pass it to John because he's going to make a layup, but he's like, Coach Ben, he's told me that I've got to go this early reversal anyway, so I better reverse it to Sam over there. And you don't want to take that away from him. You want them to be able to see an advantage and use an advantage. So yeah, it's got to be taught in more of a, this is the shape concept. This is what we're aiming for. But by all means, any great chance you get to score, just have at it. That's the general idea that I try and teach with anyway. It's just that sometimes it's easier than others. It's very easy to say as a concept, right? But chops and changes a bit.
Joel, can I just back Nagsy up then? Because I went and watched SDP up at Albury Valley, and it was amazing how many, is it a thing that they are not to take mid-range shots? Because it just appeared that there was never, ever to be a mid-range shot taken, and they would actually restructure before they take the mid-range shot.
Yeah, it has. It's not a set directive from anyone, but it's been a bit of a culture for the last 4 or 5 years where we this is the Basketball Victoria style of play or system of play, which you can get the document on the website, is like, we want to make layups an uncontested layup is our first option, an uncontested 3 is our second option, and then a contested layup would be our third option before we took a sort of mid-range 2. So look, I'm paraphrasing, but that's the basic gist of it. So that is what the culture of Country Victoria is. It's not a set directive by any one person, but that's really the way everybody has been, I guess, encouraged to play over the last few years. So that is, especially with like the under 16 boys, which you would have seen most of, like that's a 3 years into the program. That's what they're used to now. So most of them won't look to pull up off that one dribble. It's not something we practice a lot either, because it's not one of the highly sought after shots that we're trying to teach, I guess, as a good shot in the team. Really, if it's not in the last 8 seconds, it's not something that I would expect kids to take too often. That's an absolutely correct observation. It's something that we noticed too.
It was just interesting because sometimes you'd have a kid wide open at elbow and he'd get past the ball and he'd then run back out to do a reset. And I'm sitting there going, why aren't they not shooting? And then obviously as I watch more games, obviously that was the directive. So they're doing the right thing from a perspective. But from me watching, I'm a bit like a nags. I'm like, just shoot it, and I'm putting my domestic hat back on. You're at elbow and open. Why aren't they shooting?
And look, that's, in the state team that I coached last year, like we took a lot of elbow jump shots, but that was the only mid-range shot we took. And that's because we threw the ball to the high block a lot. And a lot of the time guys sag off that, because that's a lot of basketball, Australian basketball state teams and club teams and stuff. That's what they want to give you. So they're more than happy to back off and let you have that mid-range shot, knowing that points per shot, it's the worst shot to take. And that's a statistical analysis thing where you get the least amount of points from a mid-range 2 once you factor in the actual shooting percentage over how many points you get over how many shots you take. Like it's better to take an open 3 than an open 2, because end of the day you get more points from it. So that's where that's derived from. But absolutely, it's something that when we watched a couple of other states do, and like we watched the US do to the Boomers at the games here in Victoria last year, where they just kept on taking those mid-range 2s and we just kept letting them have them, and then eventually lost by 25 points. And that's what we're giving them on purpose. So that's what we don't want so much ourselves, and that's where that sort of comes down from.
That's fair.
I'm really happy with that. I'm really happy with the engagement tonight as well, everyone. If anyone's got any more questions, more than happy to take them before we go. I just don't want to get caught here, everyone just staring at each other. Brad, did you have one?
I did have a quick question, if that's all right.
Yeah, mate.
So I just wanted to sort of ask, and it's obviously it's directly related to my sort of 12 rep boys. So the way that I suppose with Offence, the way that I always will train and coach the under 12 rep boys is that purely we just go 5 out. So 5 out, pass, cut, replace, etc. Just teach them spacing. And then what I generally do, say after the first round of the season, then I'll introduce some screening actions, just to obviously give them something different, but also to try and upset the teams that possibly did a bit of scouting and that. So we're doing something a little bit different. What would your thoughts be on, say, throwing a different type of offense at them as opposed to just sort of, I suppose, initiating screening actions?
I think that like your pass, cut, replace is your most, like fundamental basis of conceptual motion that there is. Like your ability to move once you've got rid of the ball is key to all of this, because at any time you pass the ball and stand still, like it's not really motion, is it? Because it's motionless. But I think that other things you could do before screening, I think like if you give them a little bit of an intro to it under 12s, that's fine. But I would make it a bigger part of the offense under 14s once they've really got into it. I'd be teaching them more things like X cuts and away screens, because I think that anything you can do to bring players away from the ball encourages players to be more creative. And I know you might think, well, an X cut's, not exactly a space cut or anything, but an X cut brings a player away from the middle of the court. And so it takes a defender away from standing on the elbow, which gives a driving lane to a player. So it does create space in a different way. Now, if you were to teach them X cuts and away screens after doing pass, cut, replace. So if they've been able to score pass, cut, replace, teams are packing them in and they can still get inside. And you start saying, instead of just cutting away slowly. You're now going to step over here and set him an away screen. You're going to find that they have so much more space that they're not even going to know what to do with it. And then the first thing I would do when they got to under 14s would be to then teach them something like double gapping, because that's even more space. And then on-ball screens, because on-ball screens really, you only need on-ball screens when your defenders can actually defend the offensive player one-on-one. And in under 12, no one can defend each other. So like if you can create one-on-ones or look to create one-on-ones by using space, that's all you should really need at under 12s. And I know I'm speaking broadly here and it's different for everybody, but that should be your teaching points there, where you're teaching them to score in the team, but on their own, instead of always needing someone to set them a screen so they can get inside. And if you watch the under 14, 15 sort of age groups this year, so like those top age under 14 kids, bottom age under 16 kids at country champs, like that's what I found a lot of them couldn't do. They couldn't get inside on their own. They're always sitting there like, come set me a screen, because I have no idea how I'm going to get feet in the paint without you taking my man off me. And that's because we've all been such an on-ball heavy state for the last 5 or 6 years. You've got kids that have come all the way through from under 12s and never learned pass, cut, replace. All they've learned is dribble, pitch, on ball, dribble, pitch, on ball. And I've got 2 4'7" 12-year-olds running to set each other a screen and thinking like, what is the advantage? They're just going to switch and stay in front. But again, that's just what they've been taught. Like, it's not their fault. That's what they're running what they've been shown before. So yeah, I would look to more, to give you the most long-winded answer ever. I would look to try and sort of take them away from the ball as much as you could versus teaching them to come to it, because I think it's a crutch they don't really need at that point.
Yeah, good points. Yep. Thank you.
No worries. Anyone else got any questions or comments? All right. Well, really good, guys. Like I said, I'm really happy with the discussion tonight. I think we got 3 times as many questions or comments as we've ever had before. So really good start. If you've got any recommendations as to topics you would like covered, they could be really anything. I think next week we've got shooting, and then the week after we've got screen and roll, offense and defense, or it could be the other way around. But after that, I'm an open slate. So I'm more than happy to try and attack anything that you think you need, either it might be specific to your team, club, I don't mind. Like I'm happy to have at it. So I'll set this email out tomorrow, and feel free to send them through if you've got them. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Joel.
Thanks, Joel.
Thanks, Joel.
No worries. See you later.
Thank you. Bye.
No worries.